I've helped over 100 students for SAT prep, and here's 3 hours of no BS SAT advice in 2025. And I've distilled years of research, proven techniques, and feedback from high scoring students into an easy to follow plan so that you can avoid the mistake that most students make. Here's what I'm breaking down for you: Vocabulary Questions Mastery SAT Math Guide, Central Ideas and Details Mastery, Iceberg Theory, Inference Questions Guide, Algebra Guide on the SAT Prep Plan, SAT Last Minute Tips. So grab a massive notebook, get comfortable, and let's make your dream SAT score a reality.
We all know a feeling when a vocab question pops up with a word you've never seen before. What if you still could answer it without ever memorizing thousands of words? Today, I will show you 5 methods that don't rely knowing the words but on tricks top scorers use. Stick around because this could change how you can handle SAT vocabulary questions even if you haven't studied a single word. So let's talk about Sam, a student just like you. He put in the hours, he crammed the word lists, he felt prepared. But on test day, total blank. The vocab questions came up and he felt that he was looking at a wheel. Words like temper, moderate, and balance all sounded close enough. But how do you choose? Sam felt stuck. But then he learned a system that changed the game for him, and today you will get the same advantage. Trust me, even strong students fall for this trap. Think about phrases like not uncommon or never impossible. The SAT loves these little tricks because they're just confusing enough under pressure. So here's the move. Whenever you see a double negative, flip it. Make not uncommon to common and never impossible to possible. A simple adjustment, but under time pressure, it's a game changer. Keep this in your mental toolkit and you will avoid some of the SAT's trickiest traps. But Sam had even a bigger realization. Even though he knew a few tricks, it still felt like guessing. So here's what he did, and it's a game changer. Before even glancing at the answer choices, predict what might fit the sentence. Imagine the word in your head. When you finally look at the options, you are matching your idea with the right word. It's no longer about guessing, but it's about finding the best fit. Okay, so what if you don't know the word at all? You're not alone, and this is where prefixes become your secret weapon. The SAT is built on patterns, and prefixes give you clues so that you can break down unfamiliar words. Let's have a look at an example. Subterranean. So in this case, sub means under, and terra means earth. Even if you don't know the exact meaning, you can guess it's related to something under the earth. Instead of memorizing every single word, you're learning to decode. And because you've been watching so far, I've got a special gift for you. A PDF list of essential SAT prefixes to help you reach that dream score. Grab it through the link in the description. Now, once Sam started using these techniques, he realized the SAT felt different. It wasn't about cramming, it was about his system. But he knew he needed to master one last skill so that he can see his last score improve. And this is where elimination becomes your best friend. Here's a hidden truth. Most SAT vocabulary questions have 2 answers that are totally wrong. So instead of looking for the right answer, just start spotting the wrong ones. And you have to ask yourself some questions like, does this word fit the context? Does it match the sentence tone? If it feels off, cross it out. Now, here's where even the sharpest SAT students stumble. There are 3 massive mistakes that nearly everyone makes. Have you ever chosen a word that just looks impressive? You thought it might score you extra points. Here's a little secret. The SAT sets a trap for students who fall for this. You will often see a sophisticated looking word and it's tempting to pick it, right? But here's the trick. 9 times out of 10, that word is designed to mislead you. It's not about sounding fancy. It's about it fitting the sentence correctly. Let's talk about tone. Have you ever picked a word that seemed like a perfect match? And you find out that it was way off. It's easy to miss, but each sentence on the SAT carries a tone, a feeling, and ignoring this tone can flip the meaning entirely. For example, if a sentence is lighthearted and you pick a serious word, you've fallen into the tone trap. Finally, let's talk about overthinking. Have you ever narrowed down your choices to answers only to start second guessing yourself? Maybe you wonder, am I missing something? Overthinking is where most students trip up, and here's why. The SAT rewards instincts. If you're leaning towards an answer choice, trust it. Your gut feeling is often spot on. The more you second guess, the more likely you are to go for the wrong choice. So what should you do instead? So what happened to Sam? After he started using these strategies, vocabulary questions became so easy. He didn't need endless lists. He could break down sentences, spot traps, and he could use his gut feelings with confidence.
So if you're anything like me, you clicked on this video because you want to learn how to get at least 780 on the SAT math section and eventually get into your dream school without any coaching or genius IQ. Whether that's the case or you're just interested in learning, SAT math can feel overwhelmed, and the easiest thing to do is convince yourself that it's too hard to get 780 plus. That's why I put together this entire step-by-step guide to getting at least 780 on the SAT math section. Look, I get it. Why you should listen to me instead of other YouTubers who are making videos in front of their laptop. When I first took the SAT, I was 14 years old. And I got 780 on the math section even at that age. And I've helped hundreds of students to prepare for the SAT by being a volunteer tutor in schoolhouse. Now my goal is to take what I've learned and share it for completely free. I see a ton of YouTubers who are gatekeeping their secrets or putting it behind a $1,000 paywall. But I'm on a mission to help 1,000 students to get 780 plus by sharing every resource you need for completely free. So congratulations on taking the first step into the crazy world of SAT. Most importantly, sit back, take a pen and pencil, and prepare to take notes, because at the end of the video, you will take massive action. But before we get into it, it would mean a ton if you could smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so that we can impact more students. With that said, let's dive into it. So I put together this guide for you to give you a step-by-step strategy. So the first 2 steps are for beginners and the next 2 are for intermediate students. And the last 2 are for advanced students. Let's jump into the first thing that any SAT test taker has to do, which is getting started. I recommend you to spend 1 or 2 months on this step. So this
step essentially is about the format of the test. As you know, there are 2 modules and they're adaptive. You just have to be happy if you get the harder module. So in this step, your focus is gonna be on 4 main areas: parts of algebra, problem solving and data analysis, advanced math, and additional topics in math like geometry and trigonometry. The best source I can recommend is Khan Academy because it has a ton of videos and exercises. Comment 60-day digital SAT math course. My advice to you is not using question bank of College Board because there are questions that are taken from official blue book practice tests and you will just spoil those tests. So the second step you have to follow is assessing your starting point. And this is gonna take about 12 hours. So what you have to do is take College Board practice test number 1. Then view your score and write down which question types you struggled with. Analyze the questions. For example, I did a video walkthrough of College Board Blue Book practice test number 1 and you can watch that after taking that practice test so that you can understand those questions. Now let's move on to the intermediate steps, which are steps 3 and 4. So we will start off with using official practice materials and I recommend you to spend about a month for it. As you know, there are 6 official practice tests on Blue Book and spend around a month for those. The most important thing at this step is developing advanced strategies. For example, you can develop strategies for pacing, plugging in numbers, back solving, and elimination techniques. I also recommend you to have a mistake or error log where you're gonna document your mistakes so that you will not make the same mistake again and again. You also have to review it consistently to avoid repeating those same mistakes. So step number 4 is developing test day strategies. When you take all these 6 practice tests, you will understand more about the questions and how digital SAT math is structured and how College Board asks you questions. And you can easily create your own test day strategies. For example, you can create a strategy called Desmos calculator use, and what this will essentially mean is practicing efficiently using the calculator section so that you can save time so that you can save a ton of time for more challenging questions. The best strategy is just staying calm under pressure. You can even develop some mindful techniques so that you can stay calm and just focus on the SAT questions. So these last 2 steps are for advanced students. So it all starts off with test day preparation. The night before your exam, you have to get a good night's sleep and avoid last minute cramming. Don't try to learn anything new in those last minutes. In the morning of the test, you have to eat healthy breakfast and do a few warm-up problems to get your brain in. Just a few. Then, it's all about test execution. Read each question carefully. Manage your time well. And remember to double check your answers if time permits. Now let's talk about step number 6, which is post-test reflection. This step might be optional, but if you want to retake this test or offer advice to some other people, this step is so important, and it's analyzing your performance. After the test, just reflect on what went well and what you have been. So overall, I recommend you to spend between 2 and 4 months for SAT math section.
This is what you think a high score on the SAT is. But this is what getting a 1500 plus looks like. And in this video, I'm gonna show you the SAT Iceberg theory and the 5 strategies that have helped hundreds of students increase their SAT scores. Let's start with what everyone knows, the visible part of the SAT prep. This is the stuff you see on the surface. Practice tests, vocabulary drills, review books. Don't get me wrong, they These are important. They are the starting point of any SAT prep journey. This is where things get really interesting. Here's what 99% of students do. They focus on endlessly solving practice tests, thinking that repetition alone will lead to success. And they believe that more tests they complete, the closer they are to get to their dream score. But here's the harsh reality. If you're like 99% of students, you're setting yourself up for failure every single day. Think about it. The SAT is taken by millions of students every single year, and the average score is just around 1050. One of the best pieces of SAT advice I can ever give you is this. Don't study harder, study smarter by mastering pattern recognition. So you may be thinking, what do I mean by pattern recognition? The SAT isn't about testing how smart you are. It's all about how well you can recognize repeated traps and tricks. For example, in the reading section, the test makers are experts at writing trap answer choices, answers that kind of sound correct because they borrow phrases straight from the passage. But here's the thing, they are designed to distract you. The correct answers are always evidence-based, and once you learn how to spot these traps, you can definitely increase your accuracy on the SAT dramatically. But this isn't just about reading traps. There's one advanced concept the top 1% of students use, and it's called answer elimination mastery. Now, what is answer elimination mastery? It's not about guessing blindly when you are unsure of the answer. It's all about actively answering or identifying patterns in wrong answer choices. For example, in the reading section, words like always or never in reading answer choices are almost always wrong. And in math, overly complex answers often signal a mistake that can distract you. And this allows you to narrow down your choices with surgical precision. And even if when the question seems impossible at first glance. But let me warn you, answer elimination mastery is only the first level of the iceberg. It's so powerful, but it's not enough to guarantee you'll reach a top score. But if you want to separate yourself even further, you need to dive one level deeper. Here's what many students don't know about time optimization. Most students don't even realize that the SAT is just as much a test of time management as it's a test of skills. Think about this. Would you spend 5 minutes on easy questions worth the same points as a hard one? Of course not. And yet, most students waste precious time on straightforward questions, leaving themselves scrambling to finish the hard ones at the end of the test. The 1% of test takers do something completely different. They optimize their time by organizing or strategically banking it for the tougher questions. For example, on the math section, the first 10 questions are often the easiest ones. And I highly recommend you to not to spend more than 45 seconds per question here. That saved time becomes your secret weapon when you let or hit the trickier problems later on. This one adjustment alone can make a huge difference in your score. So now we've covered some powerful strategies, but I want to show you one more method, a method so effective you can literally start using it to see instant results. And it's called QTPA, Question Text Predicts and Answer Choices. Let me show you how it works. The first part, question. Start by carefully reading and underlining what the question is asking. Most students rush through the step, but slowing down here is so critical. Part 2, text. Next, go directly to the relevant part of the passage or problem. The third part, predicting. Before even you look at the answer choices, predict what the correct answer might look like. This step forces your brain to engage with the material and eliminates second guessing. Next up, we have answer choices. Compare your prediction to the answer choices. Use elimination mastery so that you can cross out some answer choices that do not really align with your prediction. And you may be thinking, why QTPA actually work? Because it works because it flips the usual approach on its head. Most students dive straight into the answer choices and get confused by the distractors. But with QTBA, you are in control. You aren't just picking answers, you're solving questions with confidence and clarity.
So here we have the first question, and it's an easy one. So in this equation above, what's the value of x? So what we do is very simple. We're gonna multiply 20 by 5, and that equals to 4x. And that would be 100 equals 4x. So let's divide 4 by both sides. So we get x equals 25. So the correct answer is A. Let's move on to the second question. So Hector used a tool called an auger to remove corn from a storage bin at a constant rate. So it's kind of a linear equation. The bin contained 24,000 bushels of corn when Hector began to use the auger. After 5 hours of using the auger, 19,350 bushels of corn remained in the bin. If the auger continues to remove corn at this rate, at this constant rate, what's the total number of hours will Hector will have been using the auger when 12,840 bushels of corn remain in the bin? So we know that after those 5 hours, what we should do is to kind of uh, remove the bushel. So that would be 24,000 minus 19,350, because we're calculating something that happened after 5 hours. So 19,350, and we get, let me use my calculator to solve it. So we get 4,650. So now we know that now we have to find the rate. So this is the number of bushels of corn. Remove it at this 5 hour period, and now we have to find the rate. How many bushels of corn was removed per hour? So what we do is that we let me rewrite 4,650, and I'm gonna divide that by 5 so that I can get the rate. Let me use my calculator to solve it. So here I have 930. So now this is the number of bushels per hour. So let me remove these things so that I can write some other stuff as well. The only thing that I will leave is 930. So now let me get my, okay. So now let me write the equation for it. So first we've got the y-intercept, the number that we started off with, and that is 24,000. Let me write 0 better. Okay, minus. So we know the rates at which corn is removed. So that would be like a slope. So 930x equals 12,804
You may be thinking, how did I get this number? Here we have it. The question is asking for this thing, and we have to find the number of hours. Here, that will be x. Let me erase this thing as well. Just a second. Yep. Now let's solve it. So what we do is that we're gonna subtract 12,840 from both sides. 840. So what we get is 11,160. And if we add 930x to both sides, we get equals 930x. Now we have to find the value of x, which is the number of hours, and that's it. So x equals, let me use my calculator to solve this thing. Just a second. So x equals 12. So the correct answer is D. It kind of looks a little complicated, but if you understand the reasoning behind it, I mean, I tried to explain that as well in this equation. So let's move on to the next question. So here we have the equation. If x is the solution to the equation above, what's the value of x minus 3? So in this case, I mean, here we have something interesting, 2x minus 6 and x minus 3. Interesting. So the easier way of doing it is, I believe, is like this. So we know that 2x minus 6 equals 2 multiplied by x minus 3. So here we have x minus 3, and here we have minus x minus 3, and even in the question they're asking for x minus 3. So now 3 multiplied by 2 is going to be 6. 6 x minus 3, so minus 11 equals 4 multiplied by x minus 3 plus 6. Okay, so now, oh, 11. Okay. Now what we can do is subtracting minus 4 multiplied by x minus 3. We can subtract that from both sides. So we get 2 multiplied by x minus 3. And if we add 11 to both sides, we get equals 17. So x minus 3 equals 17 divided by 2. And here we've got b. But if you kind of find this method harder, you can also substitute those things and solve it one by one. So the reason I showed you a kind of a little complex way, but if you know what you're doing, you're definitely gonna get the answer quicker. And it's because I wanted you to explain how to do the right method. So there are many ways of solving it. So you can use whatever way is fastest for you. It's your own choice. So let's move on to the next question. So Alan drives an average of 100 miles each week. His car can travel an average of 25 miles per gallon of gasoline. Alan would like to reduce his weekly expenditure by $5, assuming gasoline costs $4 per gallon, which equation can Alan use to determine how many fewer average miles he should drive each week? So this kind of looks a little complicated at first glance, but it's not that hard, honestly. So we know that the cost of gasoline is $4 per gallon, and he travels 25 miles per gallon. His car can travel that, yeah. So his car can travel. So that would be kind of like for. Let me think. So that would be like 4 divided by 25, and that would be uh, the cost in dollars per mile. Dollars per mile, I believe. Yeah, it's gonna be like this. So let's um, let's multiply that by m. Let me all these things. If we multiply that by m, that would be here like uh, average miles. So I guess this is gonna be like right answer, and that should not exceed reduce. So he wants to reduce his weekly expenditure, so that would be. And the question is asking us for how many fewer average miles, so that would be, and that should be equal to the, $5. So that should equal to $5. I don't think that we need a dollar sign here, so you can remove that. So this one is going to equal to 5 because this is what he wants to reduce, and here we have fewer. So we need a choice that tells this exact same thing. Let's see which one does. D. So that's the right answer. So if you have any questions, you can comment down below. So let's move on. So here we have a question. A tree had a height of 6 feet when it was planted. Here is shown with an equation as well. The equation above can be used to find how many years n it took the tree to reach a height of 14 feet. Which of the following is the best interpretation of number 2? Uh, uh, okay. So I guess 2 is kind of so let's start off with 2n. So 2n itself is the number of feet that the tree grew from the time it was planted, I guess, until the time when it like kind of reached 14. So we know that the we know that the n is the number of years, and 2 should be the number of feet each year. It's like kind of like a slope. Yeah, it's like kind of like a slope, and it's the number of feet. No, the number of feet the tree grows each year. Let's look at the answer choice. The number of years is not the number of years. The average number of feet the tree grew per year. Yes, exactly. The height, no, it's not when it was 1 year old. So C is wrong. No, it's not about years. So D is also wrong. So here we have the next question. Here we have the equation. A is a constant. The equation has infinitely many solutions. What's the value of A? Okay, infinitely many solutions. So here we have infinitely many solutions. That would be same slope. Same. Sorry for my handwriting. Same slope and the same uh, y-intercepts. Y-intercepts. So you should definitely remember that. So if you have infinitely many solutions, you're gonna have the same slope and the same y-intercepts. So the answer is gonna be 2. Why? Because if we plug 2 here, and if we substitute that would be 2x, which is exactly the same thing here. And if you multiply 2 by 8, you will get 16. And here we have the same slope and y-intercept. So the answer is 2. Now let's move on to the next question. So here we have the equation. B is a constant. If the equation has no solution, what's the value of B? So interesting. So let's start off with uh, dividing both sides by b minus 2. Let's do that. So you get x equals 8 divided by b minus 2. So b minus 2, let's say, like, because it has no solutions, one of these has to be 0, because here we have 8. This side will be 0. So that's would be minus 2 equals 0. And therefore, b equals 2. So that's easy. So the thing that you have to understand in this question is that if you have no solutions, one of these should be 0, because at the top side we have 8. It can be 0, but in the bottom side, we can equal that to 0, and we can find the value of b. Let's move on to the next question. So here we have the equation, and k is a constant. The equation has no solutions. What's the value of k? In order to have no solutions, it has to have the same oh, sorry for my handwriting, same slope and different y-intercepts. So in this case, if you multiply 3 by 13, we get 39, and that is different from 36. So 3kx has to equal 48 divided by 17x. So let's solve for k here. So 3kx equals 48 divided by 17x. So we can get rid of x in both sides, or I can erase it. So now if we have a simpler problem, let's cross multiply these things. 21k equals, oh, it's not 21, sorry. Kind of rushed it. So 151. Yep. 51k equals 48. 48, and k equals 48 divided by 51. So the So here it can, is there any way we can divide, we can simplify it? Let me think. What if we divide the both sides by by 3? Sorry, by 3. So if we divide both sides by 3, we get 1, 6, 16 divided by 17. So that's our answer. 16 divided by 17 is our correct answer choice. So before moving on to the next question, let me erase all these things because we have to have some space for the next question as well. Let me do that real quick. So now we can move on to the next question. So which of the following is equivalent to this equation? Looking at the answer choices, I kind of can see that two answer choices start off with 2x. So an easy way of checking it would be dividing all these things by 2, and we get 2x plus 3 equals 6. So we can immediately remove a, and D is the correct answer. In the real exam, I will literally choose D here because it's 100% exactly the equivalent to the equation here. But in order to kind of explain you, I will also explain you why these B and C are wrong. So if we multiply B by 4, we get 4x plus 12 equals 12, and this is not equivalent to the equation here, so B is wrong. And even if, and this one is completely wrong because it's not equivalent to the 4x plus 6 equals 12. So now we can move on to the next question. 1 pound of grapes costs $2. At this rate, how many dollars will C pounds of grapes cost? So if 1 pound of grapes costs $2, here we have 2 here. 2. That's interesting. So I guess it has to be something related to 2. So let's say 2 pounds of grapes. 2 pounds of grapes will cost 2 times $2. And just an example, like 4 pounds of grapes will cost 4 times $2, and so on. So we kind of have to multiply it by 2. We have to double it. So therefore, I believe that C pounds of grapes will cost 2C, because every single time you just have to multiply it by 2, or you can say we can double it. So A is the correct answer choice. A principal used a total of 25 flags that were either blue or yellow for field day. Interesting. Principal used 20 blue flags. How many yellow flags were used? I guess I've never seen this much of an easy question. And that would be 25 minus 20, and that would be 5. And the correct answer is 5. Now let me explain why. So in total, we have 25 flags that were either blue or yellow. So there were 20 blue flags. So yellow ones would, to get the number of yellow ones, you have to divide 20 from, you have to subtract 20 from 25. So you get 5. What value of x is the solution to the given equation? 11. That's easy. Like, you just have to divide 8 by 88, so we get 11. So let's move on to the next one. A certain product cost a company $65 to make. The product is sold by a salesperson who earns a commission that is equal to 20% of the sales price of the product. The profit the company makes for each unit is equal to the sales price. That's interesting. The profit equals to the sales price minus the combined cost of making the product and the commission. If the sales price of the product is $100, which of the following equation gives the number of units? So we have to find the U is the number of units of the product the company sold to make a profit of 6,840. So this question is kind of looking a little bad. It's kind of like complex, but let's try to solve it. So we know that the the sales price of one product is $100, as you can see. So the product costs $100. If we want to buy the product, we just have to pay $100 to buy it. So because salesperson gets a commission that is equal to 25% of this thing, we can say that after the salesperson gets the commission, the price would be 1 minus 0.2. Why 0.2? Because this is what, like 20% of this money that the salesperson gets. So the actual profit that the company can make is 0.8, and the actual profit would be $80, I believe. $80. And then we also have to subtract the combined cost of making the product. So combined cost of making the product is $65. So that would be minus 65. And I guess we can simplify this by, let me erase this part. And let's get these things here. So it's a little more organized. So what we also did is multiplying this thing by $65. Why? Because it costs $65. It costs $65 to make it. And if we multiply this by the number of products that is sold, so that is U, we get the profits. And we know that it equals to 6,840, and that would be that number equals that number. I'm not gonna write that. So yeah, so that's our equation, and I hope that was understandable because I tried to explain it so well. So 100, yep, choice A is the correct answer choice. Because it's exactly the same equation that we wrote here. Let's move on to the next one. So A multiplied by 3 minus x minus b equals minus 1 minus 2x. In the equation above, A and B are constants. If the equation has infinitely many solutions, what are the values of A and B? So the first thing is, I guess, distributing. Yep. So first, let's distribute it. So we get 3a minus ax minus b, and that equals to minus 1 minus 2x. So now what we can do is we can rearrange some stuff here. I guess, yeah, it's almost rearranged, I believe. Yes. Yeah. So now we know that there are infinitely many solutions. Uh, so if there are infinitely many solutions, we have to have the same slope, same slope. I'm sorry for my handwriting. It's not that great because I'm like writing on my laptop. Different. Oh no, same. Sorry, same y-intercepts as well. Same y-intercepts as well. So that would be in the first part, we have only one x, and here we have one x. So before that, we have negative, and here as well. So a would be 2 because they have to be equal. Both of these equations have to be equal. So, so now we know that a equals to 2. 3 multiplied by a would be 6. 6 minus b will equal to minus 1 here, minus 1. So here as well we have negative. So b would be b equals 7. Yep, b equals 7, a equals 2. So the correct answer is B. Let's move on to the next one. So an agricultural scientist studying the growth of corn plants recorded the height of a corn plant at the beginning of a study and the height of the plant each day for the next 12 days. The scientist found that the height of the plant increased by an average of 1.2 centimeters per day for the 12 days. Okay. If the height of the plant on the last day of the study was 36.8 centimeters, so it was on the last day, what was the height in centimeters of the corn plant at the beginning of the study? Uh-huh. So we know that the height of the plant increased by 1.2 centimeters per day. So that's kind of like a slope. And it happened for 12 days. So that would be the increase would be 1.2 multiplied by 12 for the next 12 days. So I guess that would equal to 14.4. So that's the total growth that it had. And there was already, oh no, after those 12 days, there were 36.8 centimeters. It was 36.8 centimeters. So if we subtract 14.4 from this number, we get the height at the beginning. So let me write that to clarify. It's 36.8 minus 14.4, and we get 22.4. So this is the height in centimeters of the corn plant at the beginning of the study. So the answer is 22.4. Let me erase all these things so that we can have more space for the next question. Let's move on to the next one. How many solutions exist to the equation shown above? So the simplest way of solving this question is by using Desmos, but in this case, like using Desmos is really easy. I believe that it should not actually be So it's easy. So there's no need for showing it for me. And just to know, you can use the other method as well. What you can do is that you can subtract 4 from both sides and you get 6 equals to x, and then you get x equals 3. So now you know that there's only one solution. So the answer is B, exactly 1. But if you're a little lazy and if you don't want to use your brain power and you're so lazy to do that, you can use Desmos and it's completely okay during the exam because you shouldn't um, you shouldn't use your brain power on these types of questions where it is not needed, and you have to save your brain for harder questions on the exam. So let's move on. So what value of t is the solution to the given equation? That's also an easy one, I believe. So here we have t plus 3 on both sides. So what we can do is that we can, what 5 minus 7 would be minus 2. So multiply by t plus 3, and that is going to equal to 38. So t plus 3, t plus 3 equals minus 19. So t equals minus 22. So the correct answer is minus 22. I hope that was easy enough. So Kathy has n CDs, Gary has 3 more than twice the number of CDs that Kathy has. In terms of n, how many CDs does Gary have? So we know that twice the number of CDs means like 2n that Kathy has, so n here, and twice the number of that would be 2n. And what we have to do is that more than, so that would be plus, because here we have more than, and 3. So 2n plus 3, and the answer is D. So that's easy. Now let's move on to the next question. Let me zoom out a little bit so that you can see the problem fully. Okay, so here we have a table. Purchase price dollars. Okay, interesting. We have property address and a lot of those stuff. So Townsend Royalty purchased the Glenview property and received a 40% discount. Where's the Glenview? Here we have Glenview Street property. So the purchase price was $140,000, and a monthly rental price in dollars is like a little over thousands. So there was 40% discount off the original price, along with an additional 20% off the discounted price for purchasing the property in cash. Which of the following best approximates the original price in dollars of the Glenview property? So in this case, let's imagine, and let's say A could be the original price, let's say, or like we can do O here because it's original price, and it's gonna be in dollars. Let's say A because it's kind of confusing. It kind of looks like 0, so let's do A. So after 40% discount, the price would be 1 minus 0.4, because we have 40% discount, and that is going to equal to 0.6a. Mm-hmm. 6a, yep. And after an additional 20% off, that would be 1 minus 0.2, and that is going to equal to 0.6a multiplied by 0.8. So therefore, let's multiply these things, and we get 0.48a, and that is gonna equal to this price here, $140,000. Yep. So this thing is gonna equal to $140,000. And now we have to find the value of a. Let me use my calculator to solve it. Just a second. So we get a equals 291 666, and then like point 0.6, and it goes on like that. So I guess let's look at the answer choice that kind of looks like this. Let's look at the answer choices, and the closest one here is B. Yep. So B is the correct answer choice. So as you can see, it's not that hard. Yep. Now let's move on to the next question. For what value of W does W minus 10 equals 2 multiplied by W plus 5? Okay, so that's it. That's the easy one. Let's rewrite it. W minus 10 equals 2W plus 10. Let's subtract W from both sides, and let's subtract 10 from both sides, and we get negative 20 equals W. So W equals minus 20. So the correct answer is D. I hope this one was useful, and make sure that you subscribe to my channel and watch the the next lesson, because it's so important to watch the entire course so that you can get the full advantage of this free 100-day digital SAT course.
Now let's move on to the next question type in information and ideas inference. And this is the question type that so many students struggle with, because it really tests you how you can connect a lot of ideas and create a conclusion or complete the text. So there are two important things that you need to do in order to solve this question right. Connecting the information in the passage, because usually the passages are going to be so they're going to have a lot of information, and you need to connect all those information and come up with your prediction. Sometimes like predicting is an optional step. Why? Because in some cases you might have too many predictions, or in some cases it is so hard to come up with a prediction. So that's why it's an optional step. And now let's walk through some questions. And these are going to be hard questions, and I'm warning you guys. And you will learn a lot from solving these questions, because you will know what wrong answer choices look like and how the passages are structured. So here's the first question, and let's read it. To better understand the borrowing habits of that shrimp, some studies
have used resin casting to obtain precise measurements of its burrows. Interesting. Resin casting involves completely filling an empty burrow with a liquid plastic that hardens to create a three-dimensional model. However, here we have a contrast, so that's why keep in mind that whenever you see a contrasting word like however, but, nevertheless, although, pay attention. Recovering the model inevitably requires destroying the burrow. In their 2022 study, they discovered an X-ray computer tomography CT scanner can accurately record its measurements both at a moment in time and throughout the entire process. Something that is impossible with resin casting because, and we have to find a reason, and we have to complete that text. So firstly, we need to understand that the text describes a method that is used to study the habits of that shrimp. It first talks about resin casting, as you can see here, resin casting. And it's a method that can obtain precise measurements of the burrows. It can kind of measure it. So the issue with it is that it destroys the burrow. So that's one disadvantage of it. And it makes it impossible to study the burrow over time or keep the burrow intact. So the study by them found that an X-ray computer tomography, which is CT, can actually capture accurate measurements without destroying it, without destroying the burrow, allowing for measurements at different times, both at a moment, which means at different times, and throughout the process. So the question asks us to identify or determine why resin casting is not suitable for tracking burrows over time as compared to the X-ray CT scanner. So now let's read the choices. So choice A, it can only be used on burrows below a certain size. There is nothing about size limitations in the passage. Nothing about those size limitations of that process. So the focus of the passage is more on the destruction of the burrow, destroying the burrow. So that's an important, a focus is on that, not on size limitation. So A is 100% wrong. Now let's look at choice B. It doesn't allow for multiple castings of the same burrow over time. Yeah, this kind of makes sense, right? Because resin casting destroys the burrow when recovering the model, and that will prevent multiple castings over time. But in contrast with CT scanner, we can have multiple castings. So that means researchers cannot track changes at different stages. And it's a limitation that X-ray CTA can overcome. So I believe it's a possible answer choice because it really makes sense and I believe it's true. But still, let's have a look at other answer choices so that we can learn how incorrect answer choices look like. So choice T. The casting process takes more time than the other one takes to construct a burrow. Is there something about a time? Yeah, it might take time, but the passage doesn't mention time as the limiting factor. The primary issue discussed is that resin casting destroys the burrow, not its time efficiency. So C is wrong. Now let's read choice D. The process of recovering the model distorts the resin's shape. Is there something about distortion of the shape? So the main issue is recovering the resin model destroys the burrow, and it prevents further study of the same burrow. It's not about the shape of it. So D is wrong. So the best choice here is choice B. Now let's move on to the next question. So mosses can struggle in harsh desert conditions. So they struggle.
because these plants require enough sunlight for photosynthesis, but not so much that they risk drying out. Researchers found several species of desert moss growing on the crystals in that desert to evaluate whether these semi-transparent rocks benefited the moss. The researchers compared the shoot tissue, a measure of plant growth, of when growing on the soil surface versus when the moss was growing under the quartz rocks. They found that the shoot tissue was 62% longer for moss growing under the quartz as compared to the moss on the soil structure, suggesting that. Now let's connect all the information that we've read because there was so much information. So the first thing that you need to understand is that the passage first starts off with introducing a type of moss growing in deserts. So that's the first thing they told. And they told that they face harsh desert conditions because where they need sufficient sunlight for photosynthesis, but not so much that they dry out. And then they talked about researchers discovering that it grows on those crystals in the desert, and the researchers examined how the presence of those crystals affects the growth of the moss, and they compared the moss growth on soil versus under the quartz crystal, and they found that under the quartz they had like 62% longer shoot tissue, which indicates better growth, right? So what is the question asking? The question is asking for the logical completion based on the findings that moss growing under the quartz had significant better growth. So now let's examine the answer choices. Let's look at those answer choices and analyze them. So choice A. It is one of the few types of moss that can survive under those rocks. Is it talking about them being like one of the few of those types that survive? No, there was nothing about that. It simply focused on how the quartz crystals, how the quartz affects the growth compared to soil. And there was nothing about the rarity of this behavior among moss species. So we can't say that. So A is wrong. Now let's read the choice B. Quartz crystals do not transmit the necessary sunlight for photosynthesis in that type. So this is actually the opposite of what we expect based on the findings, because if quartz crystals didn't transmit sunlight, the moss will likely not grow as well under them. But the text is saying the growth was really good because of 62% longer. Like the shoot tissue was 62% longer. That means quartz crystals transmit the necessary sunlight. So it's like the opposite. So B is wrong. Now let's read choice C. Is growing under quartz crystals experience lower light intensity and thus are able to retain more moisture. This kind of makes sense, right? Because of the fact that the moss grows better under quartz, and it suggests that crystals may filter sunlight in such a way that the moss receives adequate sunlight. There is enough sunlight for photosynthesis, but there's not so much that it risks drying out. So as you can see, by reducing the light intensity, by reducing it, the quartz may help the moss retain moisture. And it's something that is crucial for its survival in desert conditions. And it was talked about in the first parts of the passage. And it is something that quartz may provide. So I guess this makes sense, right? So still, let's read choice D. Choice D, quartz crystals are capable of supporting its growth if the crystals are not too thin. I mean, the passage doesn't even mention anything about the thickness. So D is 100% wrong. So the best choice is C. Now let's move on to the next question. And keep in mind that when you solve more questions and when you analyze those questions, you're going to get better and better and better. Why? Because you will understand how those incorrect answer choices look like. And plus, I excluded the Blue Book practice test questions from here. And these questions are from College Board Question Bank, and they are not available in Blue Book practice tests. So don't worry about you being spoiled your practice tests. So let's read the passage first. During that distortion in France, the right to vote required in part that a person paid at least 300 francs in direct taxes to the government. The four most common taxes were levied on real estate, both land and buildings, the doors and windows in taxpayer homes, the rental values of homes, and businesses of artisans and merchants. Foreign investments were either exempt from taxation or taxed lightly. Although relatively few people paid the tax on real estate, it was the main means of voter qualification and accounted for over 2/3 of the government receipts during this period, suggesting that during that restoration. So, yep, I admit this is kind of a hard question, but still let's break it down and make it easier. So you know that the passage was about that period when the right to vote required paying taxes, like at least 300 francs in direct taxes to the government. And there are four main taxes: real estate, doors and windows, rental values of homes, businesses of artisans and merchants. So the passage is also telling that tax on real estate was the primary means of voter qualification and accounted for more than 2/3 of the government's receipts. So the primary one was real estate. So what we can say, I believe, is real estate tax played a very crucial role in determining who could vote. Now, look, like we know that the question is asking for the logical completion of the tax, given the information that real estate was the main source of government revenue and the primary means for qualifying voters. Now let's read the choices and examine each and try to find the correct answer choice. So let's start off with choice A. Those people who had the right to vote most likely had substantial holdings of French real estate. So it talks about real estate. That's one check. And it's giving example of French real estate. Yes, I guess this is the correct answer choice. Why? Because the real estate tax accounted for over 2/3 of the entire government receipts, and it was the main means of voter qualifications. So it was an important tax. So it's reasonable. We can conclude that those who had the right to vote would have had substantial holdings of real estate in order to meet their tax requirements. So A is the correct answer choice. But still, let's have a look at other answer choices, because if you're not gonna analyze them, you're not gonna get anything out of this question. Choice B, the voting habits of French artisans and merchants were effective in reducing tax burdens on businesses. I mean, is there something about voting habits? No, there's nothing about those habits of French artisans and merchants, or there's nothing about the connection between voting habits and reducing tax burdens. And the focus is on the real estate tax as the main means of voter qualification, not on business tax reduction strategies. So B is wrong. Now let's read choice C. The number of doors and windows in French residences was kept to a minimum but increased after 1830. Well, there is no indication in the passage that the number of doors and windows had any impact. There is nothing about that impact of doors and windows in residences. So that's why the choice C is wrong. Now let's move on to choice D. French people with significant foreign investments were unlikely to have the right to vote. Let's think about it. Foreign investments were either exempt from taxation or taxed lightly. And that means that those individuals would have not paid their real estate tax. So this doesn't really directly imply that they were unlikely to have the right to vote. Because the real estate tax, not foreign investments, the real estate tax was the main qualification for voting. So therefore, we can say that the absence of those foreign investments would not necessarily disqualify someone from voting. So D is wrong. Now let's move on to the next question. If you want, you can pause the video now and solve it on your own and then watch my explanation. So the first thing we do is reading the question. Tides can deposit large quantities of dead vegetation within a salt marsh, smothering healthy plants and leaving a salt panning, a depression devoid of plants that tends to trap standing water in the marsh's interior. Ecologists and those colleagues found that burrowing crabs living within those pans improved drainage by loosening the soil, leading the panels to shrink as marsh plants move back in. At salt marsh edges, however, crab-induced soil loosening can promote marsh loss by accelerating erosion, suggesting that the burrowing action of crabs, and then blank. So let's try to recap what the passage was about. So the text first starts off with explaining how tides can bring in dead vegetation to a salt marsh, and that causes salt panning, which is salt panning is a depression where plants are killed and standing water collects. So then they're talking about the ecologist and her colleagues finding that burrowing crabs, as you can see here, living in those salt marshes can improve drainage. So that's also an important thing by loosening the soil, which helps marsh plants move back in and cause the panny to shrink. However, at marsh edges, the crab's action can accelerate erosion, as you can see, accelerating erosion, and that will lead to the loss of marsh. So that indicates that crabs' effect varies based on where they are located. The whole passage told about those things that I talked about, and I believe all of these things indicates that the effect of crabs varies based on where they are. So as simple as that. And this is what you need to understand. You should make this very dense, very hard to understand passage into something as simple as this. The effect of crabs varies based on where they are. As simple as that. Now, let's kind of look at the answer choices and try to find the correct one. Choice A can be beneficial to marshes with small pannons, but can be harmful to marshes with large pannons. Do we care whether they were small or large? No, we don't care. The only thing that we care about is where are they located, and the effect of crabs varies based on where they are located, not the size of them. So A is 100% wrong. Choice B may promote increases in marsh plants or decreases in marsh plants depending on the crab's location. Exactly. This is what my prediction was, right? because the passage acknowledges that the burrowing actions of crabs can have positive effects. That which means like helping plants regrow in some places, for example, in interior, and it has negative effects, for example, erosion, as they said here, in others, like in edges. So I believe the correct answer choice is B, but still, let's have a look at other answer choices. Tends to be more heavily concentrated in areas of marsh interiors with standing water than in marsh edges. Is there something about like those where the crabs burrowing is concentrated? I don't know. And it focuses on the different effects of burrowing in different locations rather than the concentration. Like, you don't really care about the concentration. So C is 100% wrong. Now let's look at choice D. Varies in intensity depending on the size of the pen relative to the size of the surrounding marsh. Nothing about the size of the pen related, nothing about the size, as you can see. And it's not even a factor, so D is wrong. So the best choice here is B.
So a science teacher is preparing the 5 stations of a science laboratory, and each station will have either experiment A materials or experiment B materials, but not both. So that's also an important word. Experiment A requires 6 teaspoons of salt, and experiment B requires 4 teaspoons of salt. So let me highlight these things. Experiment A, 6 teaspoons. Experiment B, 4 teaspoons. If X is the number of stations that will be set up for experiment A, and the remaining stations will be set for experiment B, which of the following expressions represents the total number of teaspoons of salt required? So this is kind of a hard question that not so many people understand, but still I will try to explain to you in a way that is as simple as possible. So the first thing that you have to understand is that there are a total of 5 stations. So that's the first thing that you need to understand. And then after that, you have to understand that experiment A requires 6 teaspoons of salt, and experiment B requires 4 teaspoons of salt. And we also know that X is the number of stations set up for A. So X is the number of stations set up for experiment A. And the remaining stations will automatically be set up for experiment B. So what we have to do here is, so our goal here is to find an expression that represents the total number of teaspoons of salt required for all 5 of these stations. So what we have to do now is to identify the number of stations for experiment B. So we already know the number of stations for A is X, and we have to find the one for B as well. So that will be B, let's say B equals, and they're saying that the remaining stations will be set up for experiment B. So that would be 5 minus X. And yeah, so we now know the number of stations that will be set up for experiment B as well, which is 5 minus X. So the next step is writing the equation. So they are asking for the total number of teaspoons, and that would be 6x plus, so here we have 4, and we have to multiply that by this equation, 4
multiplied by 5 minus x. And this is the equation of total salt that is required. So now let's simplify the expression. So 6x plus 20 minus 4x. And from here we get 2x plus 20. Yep. So the answer is 2x plus 20. That's our final answer. And if you go to the answer choices, here we have in choice C, 2x plus 20. This question kind of is hard, but I hope you were able to understand. So let's move on to the next question. So the width of a rectangular dance floor is W feet. So width is W feet. So the length of the floor is 6 feet longer than its width. So L, let's say length is gonna be represented as L, and that equals to 6 feet longer. So 6 plus W, which is the width, and we have to find the perimeter. So the first thing that you have to understand is the equation of a perimeter, and in this case, it's like a rectangular. So let's say this is the width and this is the length, and perimeter is how long is this thing, which is like 2 multiplied by L plus W. So imagine this is also L and this is also W, and you just have to find the meters of it, right? So the equation of perimeter is this: P equals 2 multiplied by L plus W. So now we know that L is 6 plus W, and we can put that in here and we can solve the equation. So P equals 2, oh, sorry for my bad handwriting. So 6 plus 2W, because here we also have a W here. And after that we got, and that will equal to 12 plus 4W. So that's our perimeter. Now what we can do is like we can go to the answer choices and compare that. So which choice has it? 12 plus 4W. Here we have choice B, the exact same thing. Now let's move on to the next question. So here we have the equation 9x plus 5, and that equals to a multiplied by x plus b, and here a and b are constants. And this equation that you can see right here has no solutions. Which of the following must be true? And if we have three theories or like choices we have, and we have to find the ones that are true. So now let's test each of these. Oh no, before testing it, let me tell you something that so many people ignore, and that is not knowing what no solutions, infinite solutions, and one solutions mean. So in no solutions, there's one thing that you have to remember. In no solutions, there should be the same slope, and different y-intercepts. So that's an important thing. So in this case, the slope here in the first one is 9, and in the second one it is a. So they have to be the same. So we know that's why a is 100% is going to equal to 9. But we also know that y-intercepts also has to be different. So in this case, we already know that a equals to 9. So we know that they should not be equal. So 5 should not be equal to uh, b divided by, oh, not divided, like multiplied by 9, I would say. Yeah. So from here we could find what b should not equal to. So b should not be equal to 5 divided by 9. So here we have two statements or conditions, let's say. Now let's look at these three choices. Let's say a equals to 9. That is 100% right. B equals to 5. It might be 5. It might be some other number, but we want something that must be true. And this is like, it can be true, but we want something that is not. We want something that must be true. So 2 is wrong. Third one, yes, exactly. It's the exact same thing that we wrote here. So this is also 100% true. So you want the answer that says 1 and 3. So here the choice D says that. So as you can see, you can crush these questions because you know how to solve them. So let's move on to the next one. So Megan's regular wage at her job is P dollars per hour for the first 8 hours of work in a day plus 1.5 times her regular hourly wage for work in excess of 8 hours that day. On a given day, Megan worked 10 hours and her total earnings for that day were 137 dollars 50 cents. What is Megan's regular hourly wage? So that's interesting. So we know that she earns P dollars per hour for the first 8 hours. So that would be like 8p and plus number of hours. Let's say that n, and that is 1.5 times her regular hourly wage, which is P. Regular hourly wage, and yep. So on a given day, she worked for 10 hours and her total earnings for that day. So this is gonna equal to 137.5, and she worked 10 hours. So that would be, like n should be 2 because I'm gonna explain you why. Because so here we have the first 8 hours, and so out of these 10 hours, 8 of these are here, and there are 2 extra hours, and we can put 2 here. So n was the number which represents the number of hours that were extra. So that's why I'm gonna put 2 here. So now let's solve this question, solve this equation, let's say. So AP plus 3P equals 137.5, and we got 11P equals 137.5. And from here, P is gonna equal to, let me use my calculator to solve it. Just a second. 11. So we've got 12.5. And it's also in US dollars, I believe. 12.5. So choice B. So here you go. Let's erase these things so that we will have more space for the next question. Okay. So if x plus 6 divided by 3 equals x plus 6 divided by 13, the value of x plus 6 is between which of the following pairs of values? Okay, so what we can do now is that we can cross multiply. So we can multiply these things. So 13 multiplied by x plus 6. And this is gonna equal to 3 multiplied by x plus 6. Now let's simplify all of these things. So that would be 13x plus 48, I believe. Yep, 48. Oh no, not 48. Let me use my calculator to solve this thing. So that would be 78, sorry. 78. And this will equal this will equal to 3x plus 18. So now what we can do is like we can subtract 3x from both sides. And what we can also do is we can subtract 78 from both sides. And here we've got 10x equals minus 60. And yep, x equals minus 6. So they're asking for x plus 6, so that's important. So that would be 6 minus 6, and this will equal to 0. And we want the choice that includes 0. So choice A, minus 7 and minus 3. And keep in mind that this is between these values, and 0 cannot be in between these values, so A is wrong. Between minus 2 and 2, exactly, choice B. Between 2 and 7, there is no number such as 0, for example. So C is wrong. Choice D, 8, between 8 and 13, no, that is wrong. So let's move on to the next question. Let me erase these things. And if you want, you can pause the video now and solve these questions on your own before I solve them. So that will be so useful to you as well. So if 4x minus 0.1 equals minus 5, what's the value of 8x minus 1? So looking at this thing, you can just multiply this thing by 2 and you get the value. Why? Because let me rewrite it. So 4x minus 0.5 is minus 5. So if you multiply all these things by 2, you get 8x minus 1 equals minus 10. So 8x minus 1, so as you can see, it's also here. So that's why the correct answer is minus 10. So the correct answer is Z. So let's move on to the next question. You can pause the video now and solve it on your own first. So here we have the equation. What value of P is the solution of the equation above? Now let's simplify it first. So 2P plus 2 plus 8P minus 8 equals 5P. And here we got 10P minus 6 equals 5P. And from here we can subtract 5P from both sides. And we've got 5P equals 6. So P equals 6 divided by 5. You can write 6 divided by 5, or you can also write 1, or you can also write 1.2. So both of these could be the correct answer choice, but remember that you have to choose one of these, okay? So let's move on to the next question. An economist models the demand Q for a certain product as a linear function of the selling price P. The demand was units when the selling price was $40 per unit, and the demand was 15,000 units when selling the price was $60 per unit. Based on the model, what is the demand in units when the selling price is $55 per unit? So what we can do here is that we can draw a, what do you call it? A table. Yep, we can draw a table here. So now we can write the x and y values so that it's gonna be a lot clear for you. And let's divide it by 2. So here we have x and here we have y. So what we can say is that when the selling price was $40, the demand was $20,000, and when the selling price was $60, the demand was $15,000, and when the price is $55, what is gonna be the demand in units? Okay, so we can write an equation for this. So the first thing is you have to understand that y equals x plus b. So here m is the slope, and slope is we're gonna find slope by solving this. Y2 minus y1 divided by x2 divided by x1, and you get the slope. So in this case, 15,000 minus 20,000, that will be minus 5,000. And this is going to be divided by 60 minus 40, that would be 20. So the slope here is y equals, let me use my calculator for this, 5,000 divided by 20, and we get 250. So negative 250x plus b. B is the y-intercept. When the value of x is equals to 0, what is going to be the value of y? So what we can find that by plugging in any of these points, 40 or 60. Let's do 40, and that would be like 20,000 equals minus 250 multiplied by 40, and then we will get the value of b. So in this case, I'm gonna use my calculator to find the value of b. Just a second. 250 multiplied by 4, get 40. We get minus 10,000, and b will be 30,000. Yep. So in this case, I can write 30,000 instead of b. 30,000. So now I know the equation. Now what I can do is that I can plug in 55 instead of x, and I can get the y value. So let's do that. So minus 250 multiplied by, what was the number? 55, yeah. When x equals 55, y is gonna equal to 16,250. So now let's look at the answer choices. Yep, choice A is the correct answer choice. So let's move on to the next question. The cost of renting a backhoe for up to 10 days is $270 for the first day. So that's the first day. And $135 for each additional day. Which of the following equations gives the cost y in dollars of renting the backhoe for x days where x is a positive integer and x is less than or equal to 10. So let's write the equation. And you may think that this question is easy, but if you think that way, you are mistaken. So for the first day, it is $270 plus. Let me erase some other stuff that was written for the last question so that we will have more space to write. Okay, so after that, we got $135 for each additional day. So that would be like x minus 1. Why am I writing like this? Because for the first day, it was $270. So for x days, that would be x minus 1 because this is the cost of the cost of renting each day after the first one. So that's why we have to write x minus 1. And now we can simplify it. So we got 270 plus 135 x minus 135, and this will equal to, let me use my calculator to subtract 135 here, and we've got 135 again, 135 plus 135x, 135x. So now let's compare the answer choices, and choice D is the exact same thing. So choice D is the right answer. Now let's move on to the next question. According to a model, the head width, head width in millimeters of a worker Bumbly can be estimated by adding 0.6 to 4 times the body weight of the bee in grams. According to the model, what would be the head width in millimeters of a worker that has a body weight of zero point 0.5 grams? So that's interesting. So they're saying the head width equals to 0.6 plus 4 multiplied by the body weight. So if the body weight is 0 0.5 grams, let's plug 0 0.5 here, 0 0.5, 0 0.5, and now we can find the head width. Let me use my calculator to solve it, and plus 0 0.6, so that would be 2.6. So h equals 2.6. Now, yep, there are no answer choices and it's a free response question. So the correct answer is 2.6. Let's move on to the next question. In the xy plane, the graph of a linear function f contains the points 0.3 and 7 and 31, which are the following defines f, where y equals f of x. So in this case, we've got different slopes here, and in two choices there are the same y-intercept. So I guess I will start by slopes, and I will find the slope, and I will compare the options, and I will choose the one that contains the correct slope, and that's it. So slope, as you know, equals m, and that is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So that would be 31 minus 3, and divide that by 7 minus 0. This will equal to 28. Oh, sorry. 28 divided by 7, and this is going to equal to 4. So the slope is 4, and let's look at the answer choices. Only choice C has a function that has a slope of 4, so that's the correct answer choice. Now let's move on to the next question. So a team of workers has been moving cargo off a ship. So the equation below models the approximate number of tons of cargo Y that remains to be moved X hours after the team started working. So here we've got the equation. The graph of this equation in the xy plane is a line. What is the best interpretation of the x-intercept in this context? So we know that the x-intercept of the line with this equation can be found by substituting 0 for y and finding the value of x. So that's why when y equals 0, let me find what we get. So 0 equals 120 minus 25x. So here we've got, let's subtract 120 from both sides. 120 and minus 120 equals minus 25x, and x equals, let me use my calculator to solve this. So we've got 4.8. 4.8. Now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna eliminate choices that don't include 4.8. I'm gonna eliminate those choices like C and D, and now I'm left with A and B. So we know that x-intercept, which is 4.8, is the number of hours that the team will have moved all the cargo in about 4.8 hours. And it's not like per hour, and it's not a slope, so that's why B is wrong. So the correct answer is A. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. So in this part 1 of our video, I will be walking through question types that are included in information and ideas in the SAT reading section. And the first question type here is central ideas and details. So there are 2 types of question types in central ideas and details. So the first type is the one that asks for the main idea. And in main idea questions, the first thing that you want to do is to identify the subject. What is the passage about? And the subject is usually introduced in the first 1 to 2 sentences and continues to be developed throughout the text. So now you know the first step. Now let's move on to the second step that you should follow if you want to get main idea questions right. So the next step is recognizing the format. After solving so many SAT questions, I noticed 2 formats that the SAT uses a lot in main idea questions. So the first format is ongoing discussion. So you may be thinking, what is it? So the passage in this type of format, the passage is a continuous examination of one idea or a topic. And the main idea is the central argument or point that builds up as the passage develops. And the second format that I've seen a lot in passages is the contrast. And this is typical of science and history texts. And in those sorts of passages, the passage starts off by discussing old beliefs, and then the passage introduces new findings or discoveries. And you can ask yourself these questions: what has changed? And the main idea will highlight what has shifted based on the new information. And they usually tend to use words like however, but, nevertheless, although. And you can easily find those words if the text follows this format. So now you can. So now you know the step-by-step guide on how to approach main idea questions. Now let's move on to central details question type, and this is the one where they ask very specific questions, and you have to identify. You have to find an answer to that very specific question. And the most important thing is identifying the keywords here. And I believe that on the reading section of the SAT, this is the easiest question types that you can solve. So now let's move on to questions based on these. So here we have the first question. In a study of new technology adoption, I'm not gonna bother myself reading these names. So they examined negative disconfirmation, which occurs when experiences fall short of one's expectations, to determine whether it could lead to positive outcomes for users. The team focused on established users of smart home technology, which represents inherent utilization challenges, but tends to attract users with high expectations, often leading to feelings of dissonance. The researchers found that many users employed cognitive mechanisms to mitigate those feelings, ultimately reversing their initial sense of disappointment. So, firstly, what is actually the topic? What is the passage about? So, I believe the passage is about negative disconfirmation. As I said, it's usually in the first one or two sentences. And you may be thinking, what is negative disconfirmation? And if you read this passage, you know that negative disconfirmation happens when people's experiences with something doesn't really meet their expectations. And then they talk about the smart home technology, and they focus on users of that technology. So this is the focus of the study in the passage, and it's a type of technology that can be a little difficult to use, but many people have very high expectations, so that's an important thing to note. And the passage then starts talking about the mental strategies people use to change their feelings and perceptions. For example, coping with disappointment, for example. So we know that the passage explains that even though smart home technology can sometimes disappoint users at first because of its challenges, many users find ways to adjust their thoughts and ultimately feel okay about it. Reversing initial sense of disappointment is feeling okay about it, like the opposite of disappointment, being a little happy about it. So now, the question is asking for the main idea of the text. So what we need to do is to find the choice that best captures the overall points of the passage. Now let's examine the choices. So choice A. Research suggests that most users of smart home technology will not achieve a feeling of satisfaction, given the utilization challenges of such technology. Let me tell you something. The passage doesn't say users won't feel satisfied. It only mentions users experience disappointment initially. At first, they definitely feel disappointed, but through copying mechanisms, they can overcome this. And this choice A, is too negative and doesn't reflect the main idea. So that's an example of a choice that is kind of opposite and that is very extreme. So that's why choice A is wrong. Now let's move on to choice B. Although most smart home technology is aimed at meeting or exceeding users' high expectations, those expectations in general remain poorly understood. So we know that the passage talks about users' high expectations, but does it actually suggest that those expectations are poorly understood? No, this passage doesn't really capture the main idea of the passage, and there is nothing about being poorly understood in the passage. So that's an example of a trap answer choice that is an example of the one that is not given. So that's why B is wrong. Now let's move on to choice C. Research suggests that users with high expectations for a new technology can feel content with that technology even after experiencing negative disconfirmation. So, I believe that this choice directly reflects what the passage says. Why? Because it mentions how users with high expectations who experience disappointment after experiencing negative disconfirmation, they feel content. Content means happy. So this choice matches the overall message of the text perfectly. And this can be the best choice for this question. But still, let's read choice D. Although negative disconfirmation has often been studied, little is known about the cognitive mechanisms shaping users' reactions to it in the context of new technology adoption. We know that cognitive mechanisms are mentioned in the passage, but the passage doesn't really say that little is known. So the focus is more on how users use these mechanisms to cope with their disappointment. And this choice doesn't really capture the main points of the passage. So D is wrong. Now, let's move on to the next question. Having written the impassioned call to arms letter to the Spanish Americans in 1791, that person is often considered a forerunner for the independence movements, forerunner for the independence movements in Latin America. But his role in history would have remained insignificant were it not for another person who was handed the unpublished letter after his death. And Miranda not only helped circulate the letter, but his edits and footnotes to the text position Miranda as a central figure in the text creation. And the question is asking for the main idea. So let's discuss what the passage was about first. So we know that here we have a person, very long name. Don't bother yourself reading this name. So he wrote the letter to the Spanish Americans, and it was important for Latin American independence movements. So that was important. And the next thing we know is that after his death, there is one person whose name is Miranda, and he received the unpublished letter, and he edited it and helped distribute it. So this passage highlights Miranda's important role in making the letter significant. So that's our main idea. The passage was about important role of Miranda in making the letter significant. So as simple as that. Now let's go to the choices and let's try to match. So now choice A. The original authorship of letter to the Spanish Americans is disputed by contemporary historians. Well, the passage doesn't discuss any dispute. There is no dispute about who wrote the letter. It only acknowledges that he wrote it, but focusing on more how Miranda influenced it, on how Miranda helped it after his death. So this choice is not what the passage is talking about. Choice A is wrong. Let's move on to choice B. The majority of the most eloquently stated arguments in letter to the Spanish Americans were written by Miranda. Okay, so the passage, do we know that the passage claims that Miranda wrote the majority of the arguments? Do we know that? No, the passage doesn't say that. And the passage also doesn't say that Miranda was the primary author. The text only says he edited the letter and added footnotes, but it doesn't emphasize that he was responsible for the arguments. This option is too specific and it doesn't capture the main idea. So choice B is wrong. Now, let's read choice C. Miranda played a crucial role in influencing the content and distribution of the letter to the Spanish Americans. I believe that this is a great choice because everything here is right, and the passage explains that while he wrote the letter, it was Miranda's editing and distribution that made the letter significant and influential, and the focus is on how Miranda helped shape the content and spread the letter, and making him central to its importance. So I believe this choice matches the main idea of the text perfectly. So I believe the correct answer is C, but still, let's have a look at choice D. Letter to the Spanish Americans persuaded many people in Latin America to pursue national independence. Do we know that the letter persuaded many people? I don't know. It's like the passage only focused on Miranda's role in editing and distributing, not on the impact on people's actions. So D is wrong. Now let's move on to the next question. The reason why we're solving these types of questions is because you can identify, you can understand how incorrect answer choices look like and how the correct ones look. And after you practice more and analyze more questions, that's an important word, analyzing those. You are going to get better and better and better at solving SAT questions. So now let's move on to the next question. If you want, you can pause the video now and solve it on your own first. For centuries, the widespread acknowledgement of the involvement of the, I'm not going to bother myself reading it, a dense brain structure in coordinating motor control in humans has hindered recognition of other possible functions of the structure. So research from the last 2 decades now suggests that it regulates emotion and social behavior. And recent research by them has identified a pathway connecting it to a center for motivation and reward processing known as VTA. And the question is asking for the main idea. Now, let's first understand what this passage is about. So, the passage is about a brain structure, and it was traditionally known to play a role in motor control, as you can see. So, firstly, it was used for motor control in humans, motor control. However, recent research, so as you can see, for the last 2 decades, now suggests something else. So that's an example of a contrast format that I talked about earlier. So recent research has shown that it may also affect emotion and social behavior, not only motor control, but also emotion and social behavior. So a key point here is that new research discovered a pathway that connects that brain structure to a brain region involved in motivation and reward, which is called VTA or something, as you can see here in the passage. Now we know that the question is asking for the main idea, and now we've got an understanding, and we kind of predicted and summarized the passage in our own words. Now let's go through the options. Choice A. The recent verification of a pathway between the VTA and cerebellum confirms the cerebellum's long-suspected role in motor coordination. Yes, the discovery of the pathway is mentioned. That's right. That's right. So 1 check. The passage's focus is on how the that brain structure role goes beyond motor coordination, including emotion and social behavior. But this option doesn't really capture the expanded role of the of that brain structure. It doesn't talk about emotion and rewards. So that's why it's missing the half of the passage. And we don't want that. So A is wrong because we are asked for the main ideas. So now let's read choice B. Recent advances in the field of neuroscience have challenged widely accepted claims about the function of a pathway connecting the VTA and cerebellum. Do you know that the passage says that advances are challenging the claims about that pathway? Instead, it kind of talks about how recent research has identified additional functions. It's not conflicting views in any way. It's just identifying even more functions of that brain structure. It's not like challenging it. So challenging is not like adding a few more functions. So B is wrong. Now let's read choice C. That brain structure has primarily been thought to regulate motor functioning. Yes, that is true. But in recent years, neuroscience researchers have been uncovering additional functions. That is also true. And the whole passage was about that. So the main idea of the text is like expanding the understanding of the functions of that brain structure, and this choice is 100% right. And I would immediately select this answer choice and move on. But still, in this case, we need to analyze choice D because we're not on test day. We are trying to get better and better and better. So now let's read choice D. Technological limitations have historically hindered the study of the cerebellum, but the recent development of new technologies has led to greater insights into its functions. Do we know that the passage talks about technological limitations? We don't really know that, right? Or the role of technology in uncovering new functions. We're not really talking about technology too much in the passage. And it's not the main idea, though. So it focuses on the research findings. The passage focuses on those research findings rather than technological advances. So here, this choice is an example of a trap answer choice that focuses on the wrong things. Yes, it might be true. It kind of is true. If you haven't read the passage, you may pick this answer choice because it is kind of logical. So that's a trap answer choice, which is kind of logical, but that's not the main idea of the passage. So that's why D is wrong. Now let's move on to the next question. So in this case, always read the question first. So here's the question, and why you may think, why do we have to read the question first? And the reason is because you know what you're looking for, and it's gonna save a lot of time on your exam. So based on the text, what is one advantage of attacking glass beads to particles when using optical tweezers? So we know something very specific, and now let's go to the answer choices and try to find the specific correct answer. So let's read the passage. Optical tweezers are specialized scientific tools particularly useful in biology and medicine that use high-powered beams of light to trap and manipulate those particles. For steady use of the tool has led to several scientific and medical breakthroughs over the last few decades, but the particles are often under prolonged exposure to the intense heat of the light beams. To overcome the risk of overheating and thereby damage, researchers sometimes attack glass beads to particles, allowing the light to focus on the beads instead of the particles. So here we found the correct location. As you can see, glass beads. Here we have glass beads to particles and attacking, like the exact same phrasing. What is one advantage? To overcome the risk of overheating and thereby damage. So these are advantages, I believe. Now let's go to the answer choices and try to find the correct one. So choice A, it decreases the time it takes to locate and capture. No, nothing about time. So A is wrong. Choice B, it facilitates the maneuvering of particles without directly hitting the particles themselves. Exactly. Why? Because we are overcoming the risk of overheating. So this is the exact same word that was used, overheating. So B is the correct answer choice, but still, let's have a look at other answer choices. Choice C. It allows researchers to use weaker light beams to manipulate particles. No, nothing about using. I don't think that's an advantage. So C is wrong. It adds a material to which particles can transfer any heat absorbed from the optical tweezers light beam. Nothing about transferring the heat. So D is wrong. Now let's move on to the next question. And I think that's the last question for main idea and central ideas and details question type. And we will move on to the next question type after we finish this specific question. So, as I said, the first thing that you do is reading the question. Based on the text, how do people in the capital of Mexico most likely regard Dr. someone? Don't bother yourself. Don't bother reading these names because it's gonna take a lot of time and you don't waste your valuable and precious time on the exam. So let's read the passage. So it's adapted from a short story, The Vine Leaf. It is a saying in the capital of Mexico that doctor carries more family secrets under his hat than any other archbishop. The doctor's hat is, appropriately enough, uncommonly capacious, rising very high and sinking so low that it seems to be supported by his ears and eyebrows. And it has a furry look, as if it had been brushed the wrong way, which is perhaps what happens to it if it is ever brushed at all. When the doctor takes it off, the family secrets do not fly out like a flock of parrots, but remain nicely bottled up beneath a dome of old and highly polished ivory. So this text is describing Doctor in a somewhat humorous and very exaggerated way. And the doctor's hat is notably large and is so messy, and it kind of symbolizes the family secrets he believed to hold. We also know that from this passage that the saying in Mexico suggests that Doctor is a keeper of many secrets, right? And the passage really emphasizes that his family secrets stay well protected under his unusual, uncommon hat. So now let's read the choices and try to find the correct one. Choice A. Many have come to tolerate him despite his beloved appearance. So the text talks about his appearance, but does it actually suggest that people tolerate him or annoyed by his look? We don't know. Like, there's nothing about that. And the focus is more on the mysterious nature of the doctor and the secrets that he holds. And his appearance is not the main concern, so it's kind of shifting the focus of the passage. So that's a type of wrong answer choice, and that is called focus shift. Focus shift. And that's a common one because I've seen a lot of those types of trap answer choices that kind of shift the focus of the passage. So A is 100% wrong. Now let's read choice B. Few feel concerns that he will divulge his confidences. So why it's a possible answer choice? What do you think? Write down in the comment section, and here's what I'm going to tell you about why I believe it's a possible correct answer choice. The passage, I believe, describes how a doctor's family secrets are carefully contained under his hat. And it suggests that people trust him with their secrets, so this option kind of reflects the idea that he's reliable in keeping his confidences or secrets. And this could be a very, very, very strong answer choice. So I believe the correct answer is B. But still, let's have a look at other answer choices. Choice C. Some dislike how freely he discusses his own family. So the passage, there's nothing about his own family in the passage. Nothing about his family. So C is wrong. Now let's move on to choice D. Most would be unimpressed by him were it not for his professional expertise. There is nothing about professional expertise in the passage, or whether people would be unimpressed or impressed. So the focus is more on his role as a keeper of secrets, not as a doctor. So D is wrong. So the best choice here is choice B.
Do you want to crush the SAT and score 1500 plus in just 30 days? Yes, it's possible. I designed a very specific blueprint that only 1% of students use. And today I'm going to reveal 4 powerful strategies that have helped hundreds of students just like you reach their SAT goals. Stick with me because these strategies could change your entire approach to the test. Let's get started with the first one. Here's the dark secret that no one talks about. Inference questions are not about finding facts in the passage, and you've probably been doing it wrong the entire time. You may think the answer will be explicitly stated, but let me tell you, it won't be. But if you're still looking for facts in black and white, you're missing the entire point. Inference questions aren't about memorizing details. They are about understanding the deeper meaning behind the passage. So the answer will never be right there in front of you. Instead, you need to read between the lines. Now here's the secret sauce: context and tone. Inference questions are all about reading between the lines. What's the other implying without saying it outright? What's the tone? What's the bigger picture? To show you how to apply this in real time, let's look at an actual question. So here we have a socioeconomic panel, which is SOEP, and it's a study in Germany that surveys 12,000 individuals over a long period of time. So the purpose of it is to observe long-term trends in childhood development. So this requires longitudinal methods, which means tracking the same group of people over a long time. And this study needs extensive financial support due to its long-term nature. And the key point is that longitudinal methods provide valuable insights into causal relationships, cause and effects. The passage then contrasts this SOEP's method with a transportation study, a study that looks at how many people use a city's public transportation system per day. This study is not about causation, just counting people. So the passage implies that those longitudinal methods are not needed for studies like the transportation one, because it doesn't deal with causal relationships. So now let's talk about what the passage is kind of implying. So longitudinal methods are important when you're studying causal relationships, for example, how childhood development trends change over time. However, when you're counting or tracking numbers, like in a transportation study, longitudinal methods aren't really necessary. So you don't need to track the same people over time. And kind of an inference that I predicted is that the transportation study will be kind of less expensive because it doesn't really require the same long-term tracking and complex methodology as SOEP. So here's kind of a simple equation-style breakdown that illustrates the relationship between the methods and costs described in the passage. So here's the equation. Cost of study equals method complexity multiplied by time frame multiplied by resource needed. Now let's apply this to the 2 studies mentioned. For SOEP, which is childhood development study, method complexity is kind of high because it's longitudinal and it tracks individuals over time. So the time frame is long because it requires years of data collection from the same individuals. And the resources needed are extensive because we need extensive financial support, resource staff, and etc. So the cost of SOEP is high because all these factors are at a higher level. For the transportation study, method complexity is low because simply counting the number of people using transportation is not a long-term tracking. So a time frame is also short because it doesn't need years of data. Just a snapshot over a short period is enough. Resource needed is minimal because it only requires basic counting, less research, and data management. So the cost of transportational study is low because the methodology and resource needed are much simpler. So the sentence in the passage ends with "and so blank." Now we need to choose the best inference, the answer that kind of best follows from the information in the passage. Let's look at answer choices. Choice A. The expense of SOEP is likely greater than the cost of longitudinal studies of transportation. So let's analyze this one. So this answer talks about comparing the expense of SOEP and transportation studies. So this passage does mention SOP needs extensive financial support, but it also contrasts with that simpler method needed for a transportation study. However, this answer is slightly off because it talks about longitudinal studies of transportation, which doesn't quite fit the passage comparison, since transportational studies don't require longitudinal studies. So our conclusion is that this answer is not the best fit because it's too focused on comparing types of studies, which isn't the main idea. Choice B. Conclusions drawn from SOEP are likely to be more authoritative than those from the transportation study. So this answer kind of implying that conclusions from SOEP will be stronger or more reliable because of its longitudinal nature. However, the passage doesn't directly discuss the quality of conclusions from the studies. It focuses more on the methodology and the cost involved, while longitudinal studies kind of provide causal insights. The passage doesn't specifically say that SOEP will give better conclusions than a transportation study. So this answer doesn't align with the main focus of the passage. Choice C. The passage emphasizes the appropriateness of different methods for different types of studies. Longitudinal methods for SOP study of childhood development, which kind of requires causal insights, and the simpler methods for the transportation study, which kind of needs just the counts. So answer C correctly captures the difference in suitability, noting that longitudinal methods are suitable for some studies like childhood development, but unnecessary for others like transportation. So you might be thinking the passage isn't actually using the word suitability. But although the passage doesn't directly use the word suitability, but it does imply that by contrasting when longitudinal methods are needed versus when they're unnecessary. So let's break down the relevant parts. Purpose of SOEP in longitudinal methods. So SOEP needs extensive financial support, but this method provides valuable insights into causal relationships. So this implies that longitudinal methods are specifically chosen for causal studies like SOEP, which deals with childhood development. And if we contrast this to a transportation study, the passage then says when questions of causation are irrelevant, as in a transportation study, longitudinal methods are unnecessary. So this line hints at suitability by indicating that longitudinal methods aren't needed for studies like transportation, which don't require long-term data or causal insights. So since longitudinal methods are described as necessary for causal insights and unnecessary for simpler studies like transportation, we can infer that longitudinal methods are more suited to studies needing causal analysis like childhood development and less suited to studies that don't require it, like transportation. Choice D. The success of the transportation study likely requires significantly less financial outlay than that needed for SOEP. While D is kind of logical based on the cost details provided, it shifts focus on the expense comparison. So the passage's main focus is on the appropriateness of those methods, not solely on the costs. If you want, you can also join a free SAT community where you can access to my free course and free webinars that I host. Let me guess, you've been frustrated with main idea questions. They kind of seem impossible, right? Well, what if I told you that by recognizing a single pattern in the structure of a passage, you can actually nail those main idea questions every single time? And no, it's not about memorizing every detail. It's more about understanding how authors structure their content or passage. If you can spot this one key element, main idea questions will be like a walk in the park. So you might be thinking, why structure matters? SAT reading isn't random. It's designed to follow a pattern. Once you recognize that pattern, you will save time and improve accuracy on every single question. Let's talk about the three main structures you will encounter and how you can use them to crush those questions. The most common structure, introduction, and then the key takeaway. The author introduces the topic or problem in the beginning, but the main idea comes at the end, and you will find this especially in passages on more scientific topics like climate change or etc. The last sentences usually hold the new, groundbreaking information. That's your main idea. Structure number 2. Next, we have a continuous narrative. The author takes you on a journey, developing one idea through the passage. The main idea here is about understanding the overall points the author is building throughout. This is a classic structure for history and science passages. You will see the old understanding replaced by a new one. A passage might start by saying, scientists use it to think X, but now we know why. The key to unlocking the main idea. What changed? What's the new information that replaces the old understanding? But I've seen so many students who just struggle to spot them. So that's why I created 3 ways to spot them. So the first way is look at the first few sentences. Is it a problem being introduced or a new discovery? Second, pay attention to the end of the passage. That's where the takeaway often lives, but not all the time. Third way, follow the rhythm. Does the passage follow a journey or builds on one idea? And this is how you go from confused to confident in your SAT reading section, by knowing exactly what you're looking for. And you have to start using these techniques and watch how much more manageable SAT reading becomes. And if you found this strategy helpful, make sure you subscribe for more SAT tips. Strategy number 3. So first, before telling what the strategy is, I want to show you how to use it in this particular question. So here we have a quadratic equation and it only has one solution. So we need to find the value of r. First off, let's rewrite the equation in standard quadratic form. 4x squared minus 32x plus 19 minus r equals 0. So now we've got our quadratic equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is 4, b is minus 32, and c is 19 minus r. So far so good, right? But here's where the magic happens. Step number 2, the discriminant method. To know when there is exactly one real solution, we use the discriminant from the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is this, so the discriminant is the part under the square root. B squared minus 4ac equals 0. Now let's apply this, and here we get minus 32 squared minus 4 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 19 minus r equals 0. And if we simplify that, we get 1024 minus 16 multiplied by 19 minus r equals 0. So let's distribute the minus 16. So here we get 720 plus 16r equals 0. So now let's isolate r. And we get r minus 45. So there you have it. R equals minus 45. Now we know that when r equals minus 45, the quadratic equation will have exactly one real solution. Pretty fast and straightforward, right? Let's move on to the fourth strategy. You're about to master digital SAT vocab questions with a strategy so simple, it will leave you wondering why you didn't think of it first. But trust me, this approach works, and it's exactly how you can start seeing massive improvements on your SAT vocab scores in no time. So the first thing that you need to do is to stop overcomplicating it. This seems dense, but it literally guarantees you 1500 plus on the digital SAT. And I used it to help over 70 students to do the exact same thing. Getting 1500 plus all comes down to a dumb but simple trick that anyone can do in 5 minutes. And I'm about to show you how to use it to finally escape the low SAT score trap forever. If you're aiming for 1500 plus on the SAT and want some free personal guidance, here is something very special. Drop the fifth comment I will reveal in this video in the comments, and I will randomly pick 2 winners for a free 30-minute one-on-one consultation with me. This could be your secret weapon to crushing the SAT, and I will announce the first winner on October 30th and the second one on December 10th. Now I'm gonna show you the dumb but super effective strategy that you can literally copy and paste to get 1500 plus fast. 99% of students ignore this one thing, but those who get scores like this, and even this spend most of their time doing it, and this leads to much higher scores. It's not taking endless practice tests, and it's not memorizing vocabulary lists, and it's not even cramming a week before your exam. But it's likely what's holding you back from getting the score you need. And if you continue to ignore it, it will take you years to increase your SAT score. However, if you commit to spending just 30 minutes to an hour per day on this simple yet often overlooked technique until your exam, your score will likely improve to 1500 plus in the next 1 to 3 weeks. And it's called targeted error review. And this is by far the powerful thing that you can do to boost your SAT score quickly. Here's how it works. You're gonna sit down for 30 minutes to an hour per day, and instead of cranking out more practice tests like everyone else, you will spend that time reviewing every single mistake you've made on past practice tests in detail. Now, here's where most students go wrong. They think they're doing error review, but they're doing it wrong. What they usually do is just glance at their mistakes and say, "Oh, I see what I did there," and move on. They think they've learned from it, but then they make the exact same mistake in the next test. It's a shallow review that only touches the surface. But high scorers don't just glance at mistakes, they dive deep. They break down why they got the question wrong, what the correct answer is, and most importantly, they learn how to avoid that same mistake again. And this is where the real magic happens. You have to ask yourself these 3 questions. Was it a timing issue? Did you misread the question? Did you make a careless mistake? Or was it a concept that you didn't fully understand? Ideally, create an error log, a list of every mistake, the reason behind it, and the solution. This error log is gonna be your best friend. Every day, revisit this log and drill those specific types of questions until they no longer trip you up. But most students never keep an error log. They just move from practice test to practice test, hoping their score magically improves. But high-scoring students know that turning weaknesses into strengths is the key to rapid improvements. And this is the one thing that every high-scoring student focuses on the most. But I've seen so many students who feel like they've prepared effectively, put in the hours, done practices after practices, and yet when they sit down for the real deal, when they take a Blue Book practice test, they still don't get the score they deserve. And I know that feeling. It's frustrating. All that hard work feels wasted. You've done everything you thought you should, and it isn't enough. And to be honest, you deserve a high score on the SAT. But here's the truth. No matter how hard you've prepared, if your comprehension isn't sharp enough, it doesn't matter how many practice tests you do. You will keep sitting on the same SAT hamster wheel, taking test after test, and still landing in the same score range, unable to break through. Here's what most students don't realize. Your ability to visualize what you read, especially in those dense and short passages on the digital SAT, is the key to breaking free of that cycle. Most students simply skip the passages and jump straight to the questions. They are focused on speed, thinking that reading fast equals reading well. But here's the problem. Skimming without understanding is likely to run with blindfolds on. Sure, you're moving quickly, but you're bound to trip. And that's the difference between those who master the SAT and those who get stuck in the same bracket over and over again. Now, here's the second strategy you need, which is visualization. This is the one thing that students who score 1500 plus excel at, but almost everyone else ignores. If you can't picture what you're reading in your head as clearly as you were watching it on a screen, your comprehension will always lag behind, so will your score. Here's how it works. Every time you read a passage, whether it's in practice test or on test day, you need to turn those words into mental images. As you read each sentence, ask yourself, what does this look like? If the passage is about a scientific experiment, picture the lab, the equipment, and the process. If it's a historical event, see the people involved, the setting, and the action unfolding. It's like watching a movie in your head. But most students never do this. They read mechanically, focusing on getting through the passage as fast as possible. Speed without comprehension is useless. The students who score in the 1500s aren't necessarily faster readers. They're just better at understanding what they read, and visualization is how they do it. And that's the framework that could be the difference between where you are now and a score that is 50, 100, or even 200 points higher. Here's what I want you to do. On your next Blue Book practice test, instead of rushing through the reading section, take an extra few seconds to visualize. Try it with just one passage, and notice how much more confidence you can answer the questions. You will realize that this simple but dumb trick might be missing the piece you've been searching for. To guarantee that I answer all transitions questions correctly, I use a technique called the connection code, which is the third strategy. Most students approach transition questions by focusing on the specific words in the answer choices like however, therefore, or furthermore, and then trying to guess which one sounds right. And this is where they go wrong. You can't rely on guesswork when you're aiming for 1500 plus score. The difference between a top scorer and someone who struggles is that top scorers understand that transition words are more than just fillers. They're the glue holding ideas together. If you can't understand the relationship between the two sentences or paragraphs in question, choosing the correct transition becomes so obvious. And that's where the connection code comes in. And here's how it works. When you see a transition question, the key isn't immediately focus on the transitions themselves. Forget the words for a second. Instead, look at the relationship between the ideas or sentences they're asking about. Asking yourself these three questions is so important. First one, are the two ideas similar? If they're supporting the same point, you're looking for a transition that shows agreement or addition. Are they different? If the second idea contrasts the first, you will need a transition that indicates a change or contradiction. Third one, is the one the result of the other? If the second idea is caused by the first, you're looking for a transition that shows cause and effect. But most students never pause to think about the actual relationship. They're too focused on the individual transition words. But once you've figured out the connection, the right transition will jump out at you. And what's more, it works every single time. Let's contrast that with what most students do. They see answer choices like however, for example, therefore, and immediately start testing each one on their head, hoping one will fit. This guess and check method wastes time. And honestly, it leads to errors because they haven't understood the deeper relationship between the ideas. But the connection code eliminates all that confusion. You're using a systematic method to identify the logical flaw of ideas, and once you master this, transitions questions go from tricky to automatic wins. Now that you know the connection code for transitions, there's only one more step, and without this, it will be almost impossible for you to get a 1500 plus. But to be honest, it kind of feels dumb. Yeah, it works. You need to master your pacing. Here's what I mean. Most students think that because they know the material, they will be fine on test day. They focus on getting every single question right, but they don't realize the real challenge isn't just answering questions correctly. It's doing it fast enough. And you need to train your brain to not only think clearly, but also think quickly. And that's where this strategy comes in. And it's called the Pace Perfect method, which is this forced strategy. You've probably heard of all the generic advice about timing. Keep track of the clock, don't spend too long on one question, skip the hard ones, and etc. But nobody tells you that perfect pacing isn't about speeding up. It's about knowing exactly when to speed up and when to slow down. Here's how it works. Target your weaknesses. During practices, pay attention to which questions show you down the most. It's different for everyone. Some people struggle with long reading passages, others with math word problems. Once you know where you lose time, you can create a plan to streamline your process on those questions. The 80-20% rule. You've probably heard of this rule before. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. The same thing applies to your SAT. You don't need to spend equal time on every question. Identify the questions you are 100% confident on and get them done quickly. Then reserve more time for the tricky ones. Practice under pressure. It sounds obvious, but most students practice in ideal conditions. You need to simulate test day pressure. Set a timer, add distractions, challenge yourself to finish sections with less time than you will have on the real test. When the real exam hits, your brain will be trained to thrive under pressure. It's kind of dumb, right? We've all heard that time management matters, but what separates top scorers is that they just don't acknowledge it. They train for it. But here's the kicker. If you don't master this, it doesn't matter how well you know the material because you will run out of time. You will end up stuck in that low score cycle, retaking the SAT over and over again only to fall short each time. But if you spend just 30 minutes a day practicing with Pace Perfect, you will not only finish the test on time, you will finish it with confidence. And honestly, this is the missing piece that most students overlook. Now, here's the fifth and final strategy, and trust me, this is the one that could make the difference between a 1400 and a 1500. It's to master the art of using context clues. Strategy number 5. When answering vocabulary questions. What if I don't know the words at all? Here's the shocking truth. Most students rely on rote memorization, cramming lists of words only to forget them on test day. But here's the secret. You can often deduce the meaning of a word by understanding the context in which it appears. Imagine this. You encounter a word like equanimity in a passage about stress management. Instead of panicking because you've never seen it before, you can confidently figure out it by looking at the surrounding sentences. Here's how you can effectively use context clues. The first one. Look for synonyms or antonyms. Authors often give hints about a word's meaning through nearby synonyms or antonyms. The next way is using word parts. Did you know that vocabulary words share common roots? Breaking down complex words into their components can instantly give you insights.
Only 20 hours to the SAT, and you can still crush it. I've helped over 100 students from 25 countries improve their SAT scores, and trust me, I've seen what works even at the last minute. First, I will dive into 3 mental prep tips that will keep you calm and laser focused when it matters most. And finally, I will reveal 3 crucial things you must do the day before the exam to walk in confident and ready. Don't skip any part of this. You will see why as we go. It's the night before the SAT, and let's be real. Your mind is probably racing. Did I study enough? What if I blank out? What if I can't sleep? And here's the thing, your brain has already done the hard work, and now it's time to trust it. But if you let stress and anxiety take over, even the best prep can go to waste. First step, mindfulness. This one is so powerful. When test anxiety hits, it can feel like your brain is spiraling out of control. To stop that spiral, I highly recommend you to try these things. Sit somewhere quiet. Breathe in deeply through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold your breath and exhale slowly through your mouth for 8 seconds. Repeat this for just 2 minutes. It lowers your heart rate, calms your nervous system, and brings you back into the present. And here's the bonus. Combine this with mindfulness. Focus on something tangible like the sound of your breath or the feel of your feet on the ground. It's like hitting a mental reset button. But remember, this is just the first step. To truly boost your confidence, you will need the next technique. This is the secret weapon Olympic athletes use before competitions, and it works wonders for test takers too. Here's how to do it. Close your eyes and imagine yourself walking into the test center. Picture yourself sitting down, flipping through the test booklets and answering questions with ease. Feel the confidence? See yourself finishing the test and walking out, knowing you gave it your all. Why does this work? Because your brain can't always tell the difference between imagination and reality. The more you visualize success, the more your mind believes it's possible. And if that sounds too good to be true, just wait until you hear the next tip because this one is a game changer for managing your stress long term. And here's the truth. The SAT is just one test. Yes, it's important, but it doesn't define your future. Putting too much pressure on yourself to be perfect can actually hurt your performance. Instead, set realistic expectations. Aim to do your best, not to be perfect. Focus on the effort you've put in rather than the outcome. And here's a little perspective for you. Even if you don't crush it this time, there are always more opportunities to retake it or shine in other areas. When you keep that in mind, you will find it much easier to stay calm and give your best performance tomorrow. It's the night before the SAT and you're so close to the finish line. But let's face it, what you do today could make or break your performance tomorrow. The question is, how do you make sure you're walking into that test center feeling prepared, confident, and ready to crush it? I'm about to share 3 things you must do today to set yourself up for success. And let me tell you, most students miss at least one of them, and it costs them points they could have easily earned. But here's the deal. If you don't stick around to the end, you will miss the one thing that could completely derail your test day. Let's get into it. First step, stop cramming. I get it. The temptation is real. You're thinking, if I just learn one more formula or memorize one more word list, I will be ready. But I'm gonna be really honest with you. Cramming doesn't stick. In fact, it can overload your brain and leave you feeling more stressed. Instead, spend 30 minutes doing a light review. Go over the key strategies you've practiced, review a few practice problems you've already done to reinforce confidence. Maybe flip through a few flashcards, but only if they are familiar. Then stop. Close the books. Your goal today isn't to learn something new, it's to solidify what you already know. And trust me, this is just step one. What you do tonight is just as important as what you do during the test tomorrow. Next one, sleep. Now, before you think, I know this already, I've heard it a million times, hear me out. It's not about hearing these obvious points, it's about understanding them and knowing how to apply them in the most effective way possible. And let me tell you something. Most of the success on the SAT comes from repeating the basics, not trying to chase some flashy secret method. But for whatever reason, people still don't do it. So, what's the secret? It's having someone explain it to you in a logical and structured manner. Someone who doesn't just say, do this or do that, but shows you the why and the how so you can start seeing real progress. So, when you sleep, your brain organizes all the information you've been cramming into it for the past few weeks. Without enough rest, your ability to recall information and focus will really drop. Here's what to do. Set an alarm for a consistent wake up time. Avoid screens for at least 30 minutes before bed to help your brain wind down. And don't forget, sleep is about quality, not just quantity. Aim for 7 to 10 hours of solid rest. And here's a quick tip. If nerves are keeping you awake, try the breathing exercise I shared earlier. It works wonders for calming your mind. But even if you get the perfect night's sleep, one mistake in tomorrow's prep could throw everything off. That's why this next step is so crucial. The last thing you want is to wake up tomorrow and realize you forgot something really important. So that's why I've prepared a checklist for you. Your ID and SAT admission ticket, a calculator, and make sure it's approved one. Pencils, at least 2 sharpened ones. Snacks and water to keep your energy up during the breaks. And plan a solid breakfast. Nothing too heavy, but something filling. Think eggs, oatmeal, or fruit. And because you've been watching so far, I have a bonus tip for you. Lay out your clothes the night before so you're not rushing in the morning. Double check everything tonight, and I promise you, you will feel so much more in control tomorrow. Imagine how much your SAT score could improve if you had access to all the best secrets in one place. Click on this playlist right here, Digital SAT Tips, where I've shared advanced strategies that have helped students increase their SAT scores.